So good morning, everybody. I'm joined this morning by Nicola from Morecambe Bay Wills and Estates as part of our getting to know our local business owners. Nicola, good morning.
Good morning, Ruth, and everyone else.
How are you then?
Yeah, I'm good. We've had a bit of snow, so that's quite nice to see. So yeah, and it's nice to be in a new year, albeit in lockdown.
Oh yeah, lockdown number 3, I think.
Something like that.
So purpose of this was just a quick 5 minutes so that we were going to talk about you as a business, what you do and how you can help people, and just probably with the hope of engaging and getting people to understand a little bit more about why your profession is so important and how you can help people, whether that they are local or actually in this case, maybe further afield now. So for those people that don't know, could you just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so the company is Morecambe Bay Wills and Estates. That gives you a little bit of a clue, but I do more than wills. So obviously I write wills. I do a little bit more than wills. So the aim is to help you plan your estate, and that includes wills. It can include lasting powers of attorney. It can include funeral plans. It can include talking about inheritance tax planning. So really getting you ready to think about how your estate might function in the future and how you can protect your family.
Okay, and that protecting the family plot's really important because I suppose people don't always consider this subject to be something that is at the top of their list. What would you say to people who might be sat here thinking that I don't need that?
So lots of people think they don't need a will if we talk about wills specifically. And I would say the main reason you need a will is to protect everything that you've got that's important to you. You might not think you've got a lot in terms of value, but think about the value of your family. So whether that's you've got small children or to protect your parents or your siblings, and just give them a little bit of peace of mind so that if anything unfortunately happens to you, they're not left with a mess to sort out. They're left with things organized, they know what you wanted, and they can follow through on those wishes.
Because losing someone's difficult enough, never mind then dealing with not understanding or having to unravel everything when that arrives, I suppose.
It is. I talk to lots of customers, and lots of customers come to me for the first time because something like that has happened to them. They've maybe lost a parent, for example, and that parent didn't have everything in place, and they've had to try and sort everything out and then realize suddenly, you know, I don't want that to happen to my children, and therefore I'm going to get myself organized.
And then you mentioned wills there, but in terms of powers of attorney, and some people will also reference things like a living will and so on for the wishes and so you do provide that. So for those people that may not understand what that is, could you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lasting power of attorney is you as a donor donating authority to your attorneys, your chosen trusted people, to help you with decisions that you might need to make and actions you might need to do in the future when you no longer have the ability to do so. So you need to make powers of attorney when you have capacity, and that's the decision making ability at the moment. And what you're doing is you're giving people the authority to do things like finance, so that could be banking, it could be benefits, it could be insurance, it could be even selling properties. Or on the other spectrum, it could be the health and welfare, which is around your care and your treatment. So, you know, if you have to go in a care home, which care home would you want to be in? If you needed treatment, or if, you know, the worst situation came, even up to life-sustaining treatment. So they are really important documents to get ready. And I talk about them as an insurance policy. So if you have them in place, then they're there. If you don't have them in place, then you lose capacity, and that can be through maybe a stroke. It's not just dementia, it could be a stroke or a car accident or something. If you don't have those things in place, then you can no longer make a power of attorney, and don't be under any illusion that your next of kin or loved ones can make those decisions for you, because they don't have the legal authority.
And I think that's perhaps a misconception, isn't it? That as if you were a partner, life partner, whether you are married, whatever it might be, that there is this assumption that if something happens to one of you, you know, all those authorities, you know, whether it's Sky TV, whether it's the council tax, whatever, you know, if it's not in your name, that they'll be fine, they'll speak to you. But that's not true, is it?
No, it isn't. And actually, you know, a lot of us talk about a really recent example. So most people will understand and know Kate Garraway from the television in the morning. And her husband, unfortunately, has been in hospital for a long time with COVID. And she talked quite recently about the car had been stolen. She couldn't deal with the insurance because it was in his name. You're right. Things like Sky Television were in his name. She can't deal with his bank accounts, all because she doesn't have a financial power of attorney. Even though they've been married for a long time, she doesn't have those rights. You know, those are your accounts in your name, and you are the only person who can deal with them unless you've given someone prior authority.
So then the issue then would be, if you were trying to do that after the event, it's going to, I'm assuming it's going to be costly. So what's the comparables to someone doing that with you beforehand, getting it all organised, versus having to go through a legal route to try and get it unravelled after it's happened, God forbid, but after it has happened?
Yeah, and there are two comparisons. The first one is cost. So a couple of powers of attorney is £250 through me. And they can take something around 10 to 12 weeks because they have to be registered with the Office of the Public Guardian, who are the organisation that are there to safeguard people. So that's doing it with the power of attorney whilst you have capacity. If you no longer have capacity, then the alternative is deputyship, and you have to go through the courts for that. So two things. One is the cost. The cost can be £3,000 to £4,000 initially, and then an extra £300-400 every year because you have to keep renewing it. And then the timescale, and that is normally taken around about 9 months. So if you're in a situation, you need something you need to do something, for example, for a parent quite quickly. You know, I have clients who have had to wait all of that time before they've been able to help their mum deal with care or something like that. And then that's driven them to say, we're going to get our own powers of attorney done now. Even though there's nothing wrong with us, we're going to do it now as a safeguard because it's cheaper, and the hassle and the length of time and delays.
It's a really unfortunate lesson to have to learn at the other side of that situation, isn't it? Rather than having it done in advance and organised.
It is, and it's not difficult to do. I mean, there's lots of things you have to think about, and they are, as I said, very important documents. But what we do is we talk about, you know, who could you trust? What are the types of scenarios? Do you have any preferences or instructions that you want people to know about in advance? You know, and that's all the way up to things like resuscitation, for example. If the worst came to the worst, you can write down what it is that you want, and then it's there, and then people will know what you would have wanted. And that's really important for lots of people. You know, I want to make sure that what I wanted is followed. So it's a tough conversation to have, but it's better done than somebody wondering later on, what would my mum have wanted, or what would my sister have wanted, etc.
It's almost kind, actually, to not put
Very much.
Yeah, it's kindness, isn't it? To not put other people having through that point where they never know and not actually what they did make.
Yeah, it gives your family, guidance. That's really what it is, and these are things are not, as I said a lot, these things are not easy to talk about. But what we try to do is, when I sit down with you and have a conversation, I try to make it, as easy as possible for you. And what lots of customers say is, oh, I'm so glad we had that conversation because I would never have thought of this, or, I thought it was going to be really scary. And actually you've made it just easier, much easier for me to deal with it now. And now I know it's done.
So those people that will have seen your stuff online, you'll have seen that you talk, you sometimes have a strap line around, talk, don't tap. So the reason that's kind of made me think about that just now is that I do say, I know, I'll talk to you. People are doing these online forms, aren't they? So what's the risk with those online forms rather than seeing somebody who's fully qualified and accredited like yourself?
So I think, you can do online wills, and you can do your own powers of attorney. If I talk about online wills, we often have situations where people just say, oh, it's really easy. I'm going to give everything to my husband. Husband gives to wife, and then eventually we want it to go to the children. And yeah, you can do that really easily online by just literally putting in information into a screen, and then it pops out a will at the end. What we don't have is the conversation around, well, who else is in your family? Are the people that you might not wanted to inherit because you haven't had the conversation about the inheritance laws? Or what happens if the risk of, if you were no longer here, and your partner then remarried, what would that mean? Or if your partner needed care. So we can have all of those conversations with you so that you really understand, you know, what could happen in the future, rather than just putting information into a screen and hoping that what comes out is fit for purpose for the rest of your life. You know, we have talked through all of those scenarios with you and give you a will that's personalized and bespoke to what it is that you want. And to be honest, it doesn't cost much more at all than doing it straight online.
And you revisit them with your clients, don't you? So, or if, you know, so someone's watching this and they've already got a will, or they've done it online and I thought, oh my goodness, or they've done one with somebody else and now the situation's changed or circumstances have changed. You can revisit a will, can't you?
Yeah, a will isn't a one and done item. I talk about it as a living, breathing document. You know, if you've already got a will and you want me to have a look at it, I do free will reviews. I'll have a look at it for you. I'll write down, these are the things that I would, you know, think about, because the law changes. So a really good example, actually, very recent example, is, you know, if you did your will 10 years ago, you probably didn't think about your online bank accounts, your digital assets, all of those sorts of things. And I had a client recently who told me that her husband had passed away and her will didn't include that provision, that she, as an executor, was okay to look at his passwords, be given passwords, etc. And she couldn't get into his email account. And still 2 years later, she's still getting letters and things from subscriptions that she wanted to cancel. Now, in a more recent will, in a modern will, we would ask you that question and we would put that provision in to say, yes, I give my executors the authority to deal with my digital assets. And even to the stage where we also give you a list that you can keep behind your will of all of your passwords or all of your account numbers, kept safe, kept secure, so that if the worst comes to the worst, people do have that information. So that's an example of a new thing about wills that you might not have thought about if you did your will 10, 15 years ago.
And you might have moved house, or, you know,
Yep.
Lots of things could have changed as well, couldn't they? You know,
Absolutely.
now due or whatever. It could be a whole host of things that needs revisiting. Yep. Okay. And what do you think stops people getting a will, or what stops people having the conversation? Someone's watching this now and they know really that they ought to be getting on with it. What's stopping people?
I think I always say that there are three things. The first thing is people think they don't need a will, you know, and I talked just earlier about you don't have to have a lot. What you have is precious to you, and therefore you need to be able to protect your children or your property. So, you know, that's the first reason. People think they don't need one. The second one is they think it's expensive. And with me, my whole aim in my company is to make it affordable. So a will is £100, it's 150 for a couple, which is not a lot to protect you and all of your family. So it isn't expensive, certainly for a personalised service that I offer. And then the third one is just, I don't know where to start. So my advice is just send me a message, give me a call, and I'll make it easy for you. I'll send you a simple leaflet. You can have a quick look through it. And then if you want, I'll give you a little bit more information and I'll guide you through every step. So I try to make it easy for you rather than I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't know where to start. So I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah. And if somebody is thinking, well, I'd like to contact Nicola for a conversation, but then I'm committed to having to go ahead with the will, what would you say to that? Or the powers of attorney, or whatever it might be. So I'm thinking about it, but I don't want to get trapped in a cycle where, oh, I'm expected now that I have to go through with it. What would you say to that?
I mean, I know that people have a choice. So, you know, I would say come and have an initial conversation with me. We don't have to talk. I can send you information over email if that's what you want to do. Or I offer a free 30-minute consultation. So if people want to say, well, actually, is Morecambe Bay Wills the right person for me? Because you have to be able to have a relationship. You know, I look at this as, this isn't just a one and done. I'll look after you going forward. So you need to know whether I'm the right person for you. So I offer a 30-minute consultation, free of charge, no obligation. And if you decide to go somewhere else after that, that's absolutely fine. Or if you just need a bit of advice and you want to use that 30 minutes free for that, again, that's fine. So I never pressure people. I'll say, quite often people will say, give me some information, and then 6 weeks later I'll say, did you have a look at that information? You know, do you want to go ahead? And they say, oh, thanks for reminding me, because you know, sometimes people take the first step and then sort of forget because life gets in the way and the will becomes not important again. So, you know, I'll find out whether you're still interested. If you're not, then that's it. No pressure at all.
Okay. And you are very affordable compared to everybody else. Why is that?
So I firmly believe that finance shouldn't be a barrier to making sure you're protected. So a couple of years ago, we were quoted, myself and my husband were quoted for 2 wills and 2 powers of attorney just for my husband were quoted 4 figures, over £1,000. And, you know, we were lucky enough that we were in a situation that we were able to afford that. But I realised that not everybody is. And some people are in a situation, perhaps, you know, you have a life-changing diagnosis, you know, and you know you need to get your affairs in order, you know, and those sorts of figures, not everyone can afford. So I decided that I was going to offer an affordable service because it's really important. These documents are really, really important. And I would rather do them at an affordable price than you not have them. So I offer discounts for people on low income, for example. I offer discounts for those facing a serious illness because, you know, they have to put these things in place. And but my standard prices are probably half of what you would pay in the market, because I do this as almost charitable. And there's another charitable angle in that 5% of every invoice that I raise also goes to Cancer Care, which is our local charity, you know, and they have a desperate need of donations. So I try and make it affordable for people and make it charitable as well.
So when people are sorting their affairs with you, they're also contributing toward, you know, a charitable, a charitable aim as well, aren't they? Because, like you said, they are the money that they're going to pay. Potentially, that is going directly to a charity that supports thousands of families across our region.
It is, yeah. And, you know, lots of people can do a free will for a charity. You are more often than not pressured to give a donation at the time. So it becomes not really free. And, you know, that's a one and done. You will get a very basic will for that. You know, what I say is, look, you know, for the same donation that you would have made, talk to me and I will give a donation. I'll keep going on and giving donations over time as your life changes and we catch up. There'll be another donation next time you want to update your will. So, you know, it's an ongoing relationship that I have with Cancer Care.
So what are the most common questions that you are asked? If you give us 2 or 3 examples that we might be able to help people with that may be watching this now, what would you say are some of the top questions or top misunderstandings or myths, you know, that drive questions to you?
The top myth is I don't need a will because I'm married. And that is, you know, and that's because people just think that my husband or wife or partner will get everything. Yeah, and that's absolutely not true. They are entitled to a proportion of your estate. For the number that we work to is 270,000, you know, but that includes everything that you have. So if you have more than that, your husband or wife is not going to get all of that. So that's the first and biggest myth, I think. I think the second is I can choose who I want to look after my children if I'm no longer here. And that isn't the case. The state will decide who should be the legal guardians of your children. So, for example, it wouldn't be your sister or the godparents. Yeah. So, you know, the state will actually decide if, God forbid, anything happened to you and your partner and your kids your kids needed looking after. So in a will, you can state who should be the legal guardians rather than leave it to the state to make a decision. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest myths, I think, around why people think they don't need a will.
And what about working with the LGBTQ community? So people, you know, they're in either in a marriage or they're in a life partnership, or often there's a hesitance in terms of not understanding what works. And what would you say to anybody who's watching from that point of view?
I mean, I have lots of clients from the LGBTQ plus community, and you know, I treat everyone in the same way that, you know, you have a partner, you have a family, you have a relationship. You may not have children. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And so what I do is I start by talking through your family tree. So we have a discussion about who's in the relationship, who's around in terms of children or grandchildren, who else is around in your family. And I try to help you, especially if you haven't got children, to work through, well, what would the law say and what would you want to happen? And then, so it's not always the same when you don't have children. Obviously, you've got other considerations. And so, we just have the normal conversation around, who's in your family, because your family is your family, regardless of whether you're in a same-sex couple or you're not.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? Is that as far as you're concerned, or, it's a family unit, it's a partnership, it's a relationship. It
Yep.
still needs the same attention when it comes to what's going to happen, whether it is end of life care, whether it's unfortunately something happens to somebody quite young, or whether or not it's after the event of your death. Ultimately, regardless of which part of our community that you are currently in or residing in, you need that same, the same attention to the detail and the same arrangements being made.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say is whether you're in a same-sex couple or whether you're in a regular couple, if you're not married, then you need to take much more care than if you are married. If you are married, you have some rights. I talked about the fact that it's not everything, but you have some rights. If you are not married, whether you're in your first relationship, you've just bought your house, or whether you're in a second relationship because your previous one has split up and you've got kids, be really, really careful in terms of assumptions that you may make that your partner is entitled to things, because in the vast majority of cases, they're not. So that's, actually, when I talked about myths about wills, actually, that's one of the biggest assumptions made. I've lived with my partner for 20 years and therefore they're entitled to everything. Absolutely not. It's really important to make sure that you have a will, regardless of, the setup that you have. You should make sure, if you're just living with someone, get yourselves protected, get your partner protected.
And a quick kind of question just to finish off. There are aspects of your service that work for the business community, aren't there? Because we'll have people watching this that are business owners. Now, I'm reminded of this because we've had this conversation where we went through my will and all of my arrangements, and then he said, what about the business? And I kind of thought, oh my goodness, no, I've not even thought about who do I give that permission to, or what provision do I make? So, some people might have a will, might even be up to date, they might be comfortable with that, but they haven't included the business aspect. Just want to give a quick roundup in terms of how you can help support somebody in those kind of conversations as well.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about what you're doing in your will, normally you're thinking about your personal assets, and the same with your powers of attorney. You're thinking about who you want to give authority to deal with your personal banking or your personal benefits or your utility companies. Now start to think about that from a business perspective. And the first one is, if anything happened to you and you were no longer here, what's going to happen with your business? Is it going to close down? But is it still going to carry on trading? And if so, who would you want to carry on trading? And do you want to give your executors, the people who look after your estate when you're no longer here, do you want to give them the authority and actually some protection in law that says, I'm happy for them to carry on running my business until it's sold, for example, because we can protect them from any losses. So any losses the business makes, as an executor in a will, normally you are personally responsible for what happens after someone dies. We can give them that protection. So that's one thing in terms of if you're no longer here. The second, and probably things people that don't think about much, is if you have a problem in terms of you no longer have capacity, even temporarily. So if you imagine you want to go away for 6 months, on a trip to find supplies, for example, overseas. You may decide, that you've got a mental health issue and you want to take some time out. You may have an accident, you may have a stroke. So all of those things are around losing capacity. And what you can do is you can make a separate lasting power of attorney for your business and give people in your business the authority to work on your behalf. So people may say, well, hang on a minute, there's 2 directors, okay? So the other director would just take over. Yeah, but would you really want them to have 100% control? Would you not rather have a member of your family or a member of a close friend or a business associate, taking your side, doing the things that you need to do in your business on a temporary basis, you know, so that you're not handing control over to someone else. So that's what a lasting power of attorney can do. And a lasting power of attorney, you know, they are a business expense. You can claim them back. They're between 150 and 250 pounds, not a massive amount of money. The differences depend on the complexity of your business, but they protect you and they allow someone to be your voice at the table, around the board table, or, you know, in your business. And if you're sole owner of a business, don't underestimate, you know, your supplies can stop, your staff might not get paid, all of those things that might happen if something happened to you temporarily and you weren't able to pay the bills, pay your suppliers, etc.
Okay. So how do people contact you? What's the best way to get in contact with you if they've watched this and thought, oh, right, okay, I definitely need to do something now? What's the best way to contact you?
So we have, like most people, we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, you can find us on LinkedIn. So all of those social media, you can also find us through a Google search. If you do a Google search of wills near me in this area, you'll find that we come up first, which is great because we've got some fabulous reviews. And, you know, a lot of people find us that way. We're also local, we're based in Lancaster. So we have a phone number 01524 571 032. that you can reach us on. We're open most days of the week, including Saturdays and Sundays for a few hours. But, you know, we are here in Lancaster and waiting to help you.
And if somebody wants to visit the website, you've also got some kind of downloadable PDF kind of advice things as well, haven't you? So if they were on your website, so if they go to the website itself, so you might want to give the address of the website as well.
Yeah.
But in the contact section, they can actually download some free advice guides as well, can't they?
Yeah, so on www.morecambebearwills.co.uk, there are a number of bits of good, useful, I nearly said useless information then, hopefully they wouldn't be useless, some useful information, but there are two sections. One is news, and that has lots of blogs and articles. So there's an article about inheritance tax, for example. There's an article about pensions. But then there's also an information request section, and that gives you access to any of 16 different guides. So, for example, there's a guide for wills for cohabiting couples. There's a guide for how to protect your business. There's a guide for inheritance tax. There's a guide for wills for homeowners, for newly married couples, new parents, etc., etc. So you can have as many of those as you want. All you do is you give us your name, your mobile number, and an email address. And then we send them off to you. We send you a little text to say you've got them, and then you can look at them in your own time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much indeed for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Ruth.
Okay, speak to you soon.
Thanks to the Consult Centre for organising this.
Thank you.